Okay, now that we're done for the most part formatting our data, now we can actually start looking at the merits of the business. So we're going to save this version as raw data complete part 3. And the one last thing that I want to add is we're going to be having an annual summary at the end of this model in addition to the monthly section. So I want to add a section at the top that designates which year each of these months falls into. So I'm going to do equals year and then select the underlying month. So you can see this says 2015, and I will drag this out to the right side of my range here. Next, just to keep things consistent, I'm going to format this blue just like my other cells and make them bold. And I'll do the same for the top up here. One final thing, I'm just noting this is a little tricky to read, so I'm going to format the font to be white instead of black. I'm going to select that white color there. And then if you recall, F4 just repeats the previous option, so I can highlight our balance sheet section here and just press F4 and it will turn white as well. Okay, so now all of our data is formatted. We've taken kind of an ugly, unformatted sheet into something that's usable. We have an income statement, a balance sheet, some area for future assumptions, and we know when things took place. So now let's actually look at the business. So the first line here is sales. The first thing we want to add is how much has sales changed year over year. So we're going to call this growth year over year. I like to indent these a little bit, which is Alt H6, brings it in a little bit but keeps it in the same cell. And then I like to italicize it because it's going to be a parenthesis. So for the first 12 months, we don't have any data, so I'm going to just highlight these and turn them gray to basically acknowledge that I know nothing goes here, as opposed to saying I might have missed it. And then I'm going to go out to January of 16. I'm going to take January of 16 divided by January of 15 minus 1, which will give me the growth for the year. Now, if you recall, everything was formatted in dollars, so we need to change how this is formatted. So I'm going to press Control 1 to format cells. Select percentages, and then I'll usually just add 1 decimal place here. Then it's a formula, so I'm going to press Control-Shift-K, turn it black, then Control-I to italicize it. And I'm going to drag this out to the right. So now we know the sales growth for year-over-year comparison. Then down here, we've got gross profit. So we want to know what our margin is. So rather than reformatting everything down here, I can just copy this cell and paste it, which brings all the formatting with it, and I'm going to type in margin. Then I'm going to take the gross profit and divide it by the sales. I'm going to press F4 twice in the sales to lock the row, so you can see it's always going to stay in row 4 with that dollar sign in the middle. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'll probably be using a margin formula and a few other places in the model, such as right below net income and definitely below the EBITDA calculation. So I'm going to press enter. And again, this is formatted like a dollar. I can just go over here to my year-over-year growth percentage, copy it, come back, paste special, T for formats, and now it's formatted the same way. So what you'll notice is I will use a lot of format that is already in existence in my model to format new cells instead of repeating the format cell process over and over. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this all the way out to the right. And what I've been doing in previous videos is just holding shift and tapping to the right, but that's actually a long way to do it. The shorter way is you can hold control and then press right arrow, and it will get you out as far to whichever direction you're heading where there is available data. So if I press control left arrow, I go all the way back to 1/115, control right arrow, I get back to 12/31/16. Now if there's no data out here, it will send you all the way to the end of the file. So I'm back here at my 56, I press control right arrow, and I've gone way out here to row XFD. So how do I shortcut that? Well, I find the nearest row that has some data in it, control right arrow, then here's the row I want to fill in. I'll put an X in here, and then I'll press control left arrow to get back to my formula, then control shift right arrow. So now I've gone all the way out to my X, control R, and I've filled that in. So again, this is another thing that you'll want to practice because we can very, very quickly take one formula that we made and fill it in to the latest instance of the data that we have. So now I want to take the same margin and I want to put it below the net income. So the quick way to do it is Shift Spacebar to copy the row, go right below my net income, Shift Spacebar again to highlight the row, then Shift F10 for the short menu, and then E for the inserting the copied cells. You'll notice, because we locked the formula the first time around, the immediate cell above moved with us, so it went from gross profit down to net income, but the revenue, or the sales, stayed in place. So we didn't have to do any new work or create any new formulas for this row. We simply have the margin. So that's all we need to do for the income statement for now. We just want to get a growth figure, we want to get a margin figure, because these are going to be two kind of critical points of data that your team is going to want to know. So now let's head down to the balance sheet. If you remember from Accounting 101, assets must equal liabilities plus equity. So we're going to build in what I call a check cell to make sure that's true. So I'm just going to call this check. I like to indent these. So again, that's Alt H6. We're just going to see if the total liabilities match the total assets by subtracting it. And that was total liabilities plus equity. And the 0 means that they do. They should be equal. So what I like to do for these check cells is I like to format them red. So I'll use my macros and press Control-Shift-R. And then I'm going to drag this over to the right. And again, the shortcut is Control right arrow to the farthest instance of my data, go down a row, put it in X, Control F left arrow, then Control Shift right arrow, Control R, and I fill it in. So now I have a new formula for every single month, and I can see, luckily enough, that the balance sheet balances perfectly. Now, I know it balances because I put this balance sheet together, but you will find often that when you receive a balance sheet from a target company, it may not balance. So that's something that you just want to jot down on your diligence list. You might want to say, well, I have their financials and I plugged in, the retained earnings to get it to work in the past, but I need to understand what are their systems really like in the sense that they can't balance a balance sheet. So again, this is just another way that you are providing diligence for your team by doing little things like just checking the integrity of their financial reporting. So one thing I like to do for these check cells is this should always be 0, no matter what. The assets should always equal the liabilities and the equity. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to highlight them, and I'm going to do a conditional formatting, which is Alt H L and then H for highlight cell rules, and then I'm going to do E for equals to and then 0. So what I'm saying is anytime a cell is equal to 0, I want it to be a certain color. And I'm going to select what I want that color to be. So I'm going to go to Custom Format. I want it to be green. So every time I look at it, I just know it's green. It's all good. I don't need to double check that there's something way out in the decimal that I might have missed. And then the fill, Excel defaults it to be red. I don't want it to be anything. So I'm just going to say I want it to be green, and I hit OK. So now you see that my cells have all turned green. So if I change this number to something arbitrary like 20, this has now turned red, and I know that there's an issue. So I'm going to press Control-Z to change that back. What we'll be doing in the future is we are going to be taking all of these cells and linking to them on a separate sheet and creating what I call a check section so that before you ever submit this model, you can check that all of your check cells are all equal to 0 or whatever they should be. And this is just one way where you can reduce the amount of error built into your financial model.